We are in a very interesting time in our business. We have strong brands in Sri Lanka that are even recognized by other industry players. Sumanchi has about 60% market share. There are over 50 players sharing the balance 40. And we are the largest coconut milk exporter. Chocolates, we are close upon 80% because we have a multi-brand strategy. We have Revelo and Ritzberry. We just launched a new brand called Rocoa.
Ceylon Biscuits is better known for their market-leading food brands like Munchie, Ritzberry and Samaposha. However, privately owned CBL is one of Sri Lanka's largest companies. In the studio with us today is CBL's Group Managing Director, Shea Wickramasingha, to discuss change and nurturing growth. Shea, it's great to have you here at the Echelon studios. Let's start here. Sri Lanka is now, it appears, strongly emerging out of the sovereign debt default crisis we had. As a large food manufacturer in Sri Lanka, how has the outlook changed for CBL?
Look, we're seeing markets pick up. There is more purchasing happening. There's a little bit more money in the hands of consumers. But given the challenges over the last 4 years, one after the other, we've not got back to the pre-economic collapse. And why?
So you're talking about levels of volumes that you had in 2018?
Yeah. It's not clear, is it?
Okay.
Yeah. We are hoping that we're going to see more growth. But what we also see is right now, while there is growth, margins are severely stretched.
Right.
And the higher end products have less traction at the moment. So that needs to be shifted to, for new innovation to come in, to take advantage of, changing trends and stuff like that.
Sure.
A lot of innovation from point of view of new products actually took a back seat we were on survival mode.
Sure.
So we are hoping in this new year we'll be able to bring in a lot more MPD, a lot more in new product development, and give our consumers, exciting new products to consume.
So your story as a company has kind of taken the same trajectory that Sri Lanka's economy has, which is not surprising because you serve consumers all over the country, right? If you are optimistic about 2025 and the several years to follow, you must be thinking about when Sri Lanka's consumers' consumption volumes will come back to where they were in 2018 and when the spend or when the margins recover to what they were possibly in 2018. What are your thoughts about these two areas currently?
Look, the economy is getting more buoyant. We're seeing tourism. Tourism is also good because that's additional consumption coming in. Our budgets for next year are quite robust. We are very optimistic.
You're referring to the next financial year?
Next financial year. I think you need to be optimistic. You need to look forward rather than be pessimistic. So that's the approach we're taking.
How important is it for you as a leader, you think, to be setting that tone in the company? Is that future view largely dependent on the tone you set as a leader about the future?
I think it's not an individual tone. We have a fabulous team at CBL. Our businesses are driven by respective CEOs, and they bring a lot into the tone of where we are going.
Sure.
They have, I think they have a fair amount of say in how the business goes as well.
Sure.
It's a collective responsibility, I would say.
I mean, if you had to kind of make an optimistic estimation, do you think in the next financial year, which starts in about a month from now, that is the financial year of 2025-26, right? Do you anticipate a recovery will be complete? We'll be back to where we were in 2018.
I hope so. But there are certain industries have challenges. Agriculture-related businesses or supply chain, where the supply chain is predominantly local, has challenges. You've seen in the recent past. Coconuts are almost double of what we budgeted. And as an industry, it's very hard to sustain. This is an ongoing conversation with government to how we can mitigate, because I don't know if you know, CBL got into this coconut space quite recently compared to some of the other businesses, and we are the largest coconut milk exporter out of the country. And if that growth momentum, it is easy to grow that. The industry could be a $2 billion industry. But supply chain becomes key. So there is short-term, medium, and long-term. Long-term, obviously, everyone's working on improving the supply chain. It takes 6 years for a coconut tree to really start bearing fruit. So challenges, a lot of opportunity. So we are in conversation with government to see how we could, still grow the industry and have the supply chain available. If you take Thailand, for example, Thailand produces a fraction of the coconuts that we produce, but their exports are way higher than ours. So there's opportunity. And I think one of the challenges for this country, being a small island, limited supply chains, we need to think outside the box and not in the same constrained way. We are so scared to look beyond what we've been doing. And we have to understand today science is at a different space now. And the ability to control. So with agriculture, the biggest issues are pest, coming into the country. But today, there are so many ways to mitigate this. And this is what Thailand is doing.
Right.
And I think
so essentially what you're suggesting is Thailand imports a lot of the coconut and then processes it, value adds and exports.
Yeah, and it's like how the garment industry grew. For example, it was all supply chain, all came from elsewhere, and then they started building some of it in Sri Lanka. So for many industries, Sri Lanka has an opportunity to do this if we have the right policies in place.
Right.
And I think that is where the conversations need to be stronger between private sector and public sector.
Right. If you look at, CBL is a very large business. People may associate CBL more with the brands. They may know CBL by the names of the brands rather than the company itself, right? You are, as a food company, you're in biscuits, you're in chocolates, and various other food products. And you just mentioned that processed coconut milk, etc., is stuff that you're in. Can you paint us a picture about the product lineup that CBL has and potentially what market shares it has in each of these products?
So I like when we have buyers, rather than just sitting in a room, I like to take them to supermarket, because we are presented in every packaged food aisle. And it's really nice to see. So yes, everyone knows us for Munchie, and that's our flagship brand. Chocolates. So Munchie has about 60% market share.
Right.
And you'd be interested to know there are over 50 players sharing the balance 40. Chocolates, we are close upon 80% because we have a multi-brand strategy. We have Revelo and Ritzberry. And we just launched a new brand called Rocoa. Marketing chocolates in Sri Lanka, high temperatures, quite challenging.
Right.
And price points are challenging. Affordability, cocoa prices globally have gone through the roof. They're the highest they've ever been. So again, in an emerging market, you've got to have affordability. And that's actually the biggest challenge
Sure.
for us. Lanka soy, we are the market leader with the soy range, and we have a lot of innovation planned for that category. Samaposha is ours. We have over 75% market share of that. We do sponge cakes, Tiara. Sarah is a brand. It's one of our newest brands, which is a multi-category brand. So we started with coconut milk, liquid coconut milk, no additives, 100% coconut. And we're going to spices, noodles, wherever, it's what I say, a pantry item,
Right.
where we can add value. And our focus really with Sarah is really to see how we can add value to local supply chain. I think it's very sad for Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka, we're not really progressed if you look at agriculture and beyond, because there's so little value addition. And for farmers, for the next gen to be involved in agriculture, we need to look at this from a different lens. We need to, I think, bring technology into it, because we also don't have land in this country. And we need to value add. And there has to be a bigger participation by the smallholders, because Sri Lankan farming is predominantly smallholders,
Sure.
small acreage. And I think there's, again, a lot to learn from other countries. We don't have a very robust cooperative system in agriculture. These are things that in the future, I think we would like to see. And we work a lot in the agriculture space. And these are kind of concepts that we are trying to bring in.
Right. So when you're thinking about growth here, given the small market size, your strategy has been to build in every segment or the segments that you're competing in a number one or number two kind of brand. And you've achieved number one status in many of the segments that you're already playing.
Pretty much all, yeah.
Pretty much
if
all.
I can be modest.
And you're, I suppose, going into processed coconut milk, etc., with the same intention.
Yeah, so coconut milk actually started up predominantly for exports.
Right.
Because the kind of volume, the other thing, the food industry, for a large part, if you want to get scale, it's very capital intensive.
Right.
And this is, I think, one of the challenges. You see small businesses, startups coming up, but from that point to scale it up requires a lot of money. And this is one of the biggest challenges for the food industry in Sri Lanka, is that access. And also, you need to develop markets.
Sure.
Markets are not robust, margins are not robust. So it's very challenging for small businesses to scale up.
Right, I understand. You must be looking at the pain points constantly, right? You have market leadership. You have 60% of a market. How much bigger can you get? You can't realistically target 100% or 90%, right? And then you're also looking at the constraints for scaling, right? They could be the supply chain, they could be the source, the agriculture, they could be supply chain because you need to import some of the inputs, and that's kind of challenging. When you look at those big constraints to scaling the business, it includes capital, talent, all that, right? When you look at the big challenges to scaling, what are they?
For us in Sri Lanka, because we work in so many categories, the different categories have
their own challenges.
They have different challenges.
Okay.
But I think if you're going to generalize, I think supply chain is really important, and talent, people, because we are having a lot of skill migration. Leaving the country, we hope that reverses. I think the IMF said we're going to see people coming back, and I think we need our young talent to remain, because I think Sri Lanka is also very behind other countries when it comes to the food industry in particular. If you take our neighbor India, actually at one point I think we were, slightly even ahead, even though we didn't have scale to that extent. But now, the kind of things that are happening in that country, in India, it's amazing.
Are you referring to the supply chain? Are you referring to
I'm referring
innovation?
to supply chain, innovation, investment,
Right.
technology,
Okay.
the whole value chain, really.
Right. How do you approach that problem now? You as a leader and as a leadership team at CBL, you can't kind of sit back and say, okay, these are beyond our control.
Oh, you've got to take them on. We're
Take them
taking them
on.
head on.
Right. How do you start to do that?
As I said, we have an excellent team. You brainstorm. I mean, a key driver in our budgets is improving efficiency.
Right.
Sri Lanka as a country is not efficient. And while I think we are not bad when you benchmark internationally, we have our group also, we can definitely improve. And I think that's a challenge the team is taking on. How can we do things better?
So when you say we are not that bad, you mean CBL, when you benchmark against global food companies, you're not bad. But Sri Lanka in general is doing very poorly.
Yeah. Efficiency is appalling.
Right.
And I think it's a mindset change also that we need to have. You don't need 3 people to do the job of one. You need to invest in technology, because the other thing in Sri Lanka is there's a dearth of people. We have vacancies right across most of our businesses. So there's a shift, and businesses need to understand that. So technology, I think, has to play a big role. But technology, again, little is developed in the country. If you take ERP systems or for larger businesses like ourselves, which means we have to get foreign licenses, which are very expensive, and it's a tiger by the tail. You invest in technology, then comes security. Today, cybersecurity is a huge conversation, and it's a tiger by the tail. You just cannot let go. And these are challenges for medium-sized businesses.
It's strange that you call yourself a medium-sized business.
I'm not talking about us.
Yeah.
In Sri Lanka, we're definitely a very large business. But I'm talking about, for a country to thrive, you need the smaller businesses to thrive as well.
Sure.
Our SME sector is not thriving, and it's critical. And companies like ours can support. I really believe in partnerships. We don't need to do everything.
Right.
And that's, I think that's how countries grow. But it's challenging, because you need data. Today you have to be data driven. That's a lot to be said for that. But then you need a lot of infrastructure, which is expensive.
As a family-owned business, how have you approached funding the growth? You're constantly taking big risks. I mean, in systems, you need world-class ERP. You need top-of-the-line machinery. You need to then bring that machinery and then rejig it to produce a Sri Lankan-friendly product with our raw materials, right? You need capital. You need new thinking. How have you managed to do that?
So I think if you take our journey, I mean, we're over 55 years in business. At the inception, when we started, that was when the founders, that's who took the risk. Because honestly, I remember my father said, they borrowed. So I remember at a very young age meeting a marketing director of Unilever. I would have been in my early teens. And I remember her saying she was so impressed at the standard of the biscuit industry in Sri Lanka, because this would have been in the 70s.
Sure.
There was very little industry. But biscuit industry always, I think, invested in technology, because it is a capex heavy industry. And so they took big risks. We were a closed economy in the 70s. And I think a lot of the risk in investment was taken at that point. And when growth started, when we started, so in 2000, we got market leadership. And we were running out of capacity.
Right.
So we had invested in a business in India at the time, which was not fully utilizing. So we had bought a business. So we actually bought those machines temporarily to Sri Lanka, and that's how we fed the market, while it takes about at least a year for a machine to come from point of order.
Sure.
till we could do that. And so innovative thinking outside the box, that's what I think we as a company, people call us aggressive. And I think we have been in trying to achieve our objective. But I don't think aggressive is a bad word. It's that we've seen opportunity and taken it. I'm very thankful that when COVID hit and followed by the economic collapse, that we were not highly geared. By that time, we were generating a lot of the funds in-house and could breathe easy. At 30% interest rates, businesses can't survive. So we were very, very lucky during that time. So our challenge really when it comes to funding is funding our business ventures overseas. And for us, growth and sustainability sustainability of the business has to come with having access to bigger markets. And while we export, it's not in FMCG, you need to be close to your market. Supply chains need to be close to your market to really make an impact, if you want to make an impact.
Sure.
So that's our biggest challenge. So you will see us looking for foreign capital, because we need to bring capital from outside if you want to invest outside.
Right.
And
so you've been working in overseas market, you've been exporting, you've been manufacturing overseas for a while, right? Which part of the business are you more optimistic about for the next few years?
I am very optimistic about everything, because I think when it comes to food, people have to eat, and it's up to you to change with what consumers want.
Right.
So even if you take biscuits as a category, there are multiple ways to grow. You don't do the same old thing. You got to think. You got to give consumers what they need. The younger generation today, their eating habits are very different.
Right.
So you need to understand. You need to understand your market, how it's evolving, and that's true for every category that we are in.
Do you think you'd see stronger growth overseas over the next few years than
we want to? We are looking, because I think we are in a very interesting time in our business, where we have strong brands in Sri Lanka, strong brands that are even recognized by other industry players.
Sure.
So we are in a space now, and we have opportunity mainly in emerging markets to develop our brands. And yes, we want to take that opportunity.
If you were to kind of like put a figure on what percentage of your business is local and
it's still very small.
Right.
And that's a narrative we want to change.
And does it take a big effort, a big investment to build a brand overseas? Now that you know how to do it, now that you know the supply chains, how to manage supply chains, how to manufacture.
Each country, Sri Lanka also, we're a tiny little country with very uncomplicated social structures.
Sure.
To a large extent.
Right.
Like, we have a factory in Ghana. The African countries come out of a lot of tribal infrastructure in society. So you really need to understand, you can't plug and play. You can't plug and play. And how people look at you, you really need to understand nuances of a country. If you take India, who is our neighbor, India is like multiple countries within even Indians find it hard to work in, beyond the states that they are familiar with. So the challenges are way bigger than doing business here. And as a foreigner, that you have to make your mark as well. You need to deliver, and but I think that's a challenge that we have to take.
When you look at growth overseas, you highlighted capital, the fact that you needed long-term patient capital to make those investments, stay there for 5-10 years to build brands, right? What are the number one or two constraints? Is capital a number one or two constraint? Or
capital is a big one right now. People is also. And again, I think we have to start thinking differently as well. As I said, sometimes, we have more comfort when we send Sri Lankans because we know how to deal with them.
Right.
But I think in different countries, you need to understand the nuances of the countries. And so we need to learn better to integrate Sri Lankans with wherever, whoever we are, whatever part of the world we are in. And for that, I truly believe also we have to look at strategic partnerships.
Right.
For example, when we got into retail business, we had a vision to, Sri Lankan retail space is quite behind the rest of the region.
So when you're referring to Sri Lankan retail space, you're referring to the Spa supermarkets chain that you have
but I'm
started.
talking about the retail, today still in Sri Lanka, more than 85% of our retail is done through the mom and pop
shops.
Which is
as high as 85%. Wow.
You don't see that in Colombo because
Sure.
there's a high density of modern trade supermarket. But those are the stats in Sri Lanka. And with a dearth of people, everything is changing. And I think our vision was we wanted to empower small businesses in retail. And you're seeing a lot of smaller, self-service shops coming up. And we started a brand called Star United. And we were not retail experts. We had a lot of mistakes and we closed it up. It was then we decided to go partner with someone who understood retail. And we came up with SPA. And the concept of SPA is supporting, as I said, for an economy to be robust, you need small and medium businesses to be robust. And the SPA journey is that. What you see are some very nice supermarkets in Colombo and suburbs, but our journey is very much more than that. It's about partnering with smaller businesses and helping them, giving them the expertise. And we've started that journey. Now we have, you don't see it so much in Colombo because they are in the outskirts of the cities. So we have about 18 outlets now. And we've started partnering with people having their own shops where they are driving their business.
Share from where you're sitting and looking at the Sri Lankan consumer. Young consumers are now the mainstream, millennials and Gen Zs make up the largest consumer
So 50% of I was quite surprised, of our employees are now Gen Z.
Gen Z. Okay.
I got a shock
Right.
when I saw that, yeah.
And then millennials and Gen Zs must be accounting for more than 50% of products you sell to, right? If you look at the categories, which trends, which food categories are rife for disruption, you think?
I think every category is, because the way you look at it. So, I don't want to give, we have a lot of plans which we are working on. I hope we will see some interesting launches coming from our group in this year. So we have multi-pronged strategies on how we keep being relevant. And that's what it is. At the end of the day, if all the businesses want to survive, they need to keep being relevant. Because yes, you will have brands like Coke who will continue to be there for a long time. But if you take the beverage industry, which we're not in actually, but if you take them as an example, look at what's out there in the market. There's so many new things coming in. And that's the same for everything.
I mean, look at companies like Coke and PepsiCo. They are no longer purveyors of
but people
the
maybe
main
not
product they were famous for, right?
Yeah, but people may not realize those companies have invested in a lot of the startup. And
Right.
they own a lot of those smaller brands
Sure.
that are now coming up
Sure.
in the market. So they see those trends.
Your company has thrived while still being a family-owned business. You talked about the challenges around supply chains, about changing consumer habits, the need for foreign capital to, if you had an aggressive strategy overseas to replicate what you achieved in Sri Lanka, then you need foreign capital for that. How do you see the future of CBL as a business?
Look, we have tremendous opportunity to grow. I see CBL having much more global present. I think we have the opportunity to do that. I think your question also is asking somewhat about a structure. Look, I believe, I've been working in this business for over 30 years. And it's a journey. It sounds very cliche, but that's the reality of it. If I take the journey I have had in the business, from where I started to where we are now, it's phenomenal. And I think the change is happening faster now because we need to. If we want to engage, if 50% of our employees are Gen Z, we need to keep them engaged. We can't operate the way we did 20 years ago.
Sure.
So I think that's a challenge for the business, where you have the older folk like myself, and then you have the Gen Zs coming in. How do we marry the two? Because there are different expectations, and you can't suddenly just cater to a Gen Z audience. You need to cater across the all age groups. So these are some of the challenges, and for that, I think you can never be constant in what you're doing. You have to keep changing. I always talk to business leaders, and one guy told me, look, when we are talking about changing structures, and we've had a couple of changes in the organization. When I talk structures, I'm not talking capital structures, but internal, the way we run the business. And I said, look, every 2 years, I relook at everything, because that's what you need to do to make sure that you are, you keep being efficient, you keep being relevant. And I think that journey is, so, I think, again, I'm going to preempt saying, yes, do we see ourselves going public or not? Or I think that would depend on what the business demands. Because we haven't had a need to go. A lot of people go public to raise capital. And with our growth journey, we've been able, as I said, to internally generate a lot of our growth. But going forward, going into new countries, our challenges would be very different. So I think we will have to look at different structures. And I can't tell you what they're going to be, because these are conversations that are taking place now.
You are in the senior leadership team, you run the company, you look at governance overall. So you're looking at also not just the financial sustainability of the business, but its sustainability in general on all its stakeholders, right? What are those priorities or the KPIs that you track when it comes to CBL's sustainability in the Sri Lankan economy, for its employees, for society at large?
So as I said, we have a great team. And again, a business is only as good as how good it is, if that makes sense. So you need to constantly be looking. I have a once a month meet with my senior team, basically CEOs of the business. Some that we also have some group functions which have senior leadership, and it's a responsibility of the people overlooking the functions to make sure that we are relevant, that we are doing the right things. So, and there are challenges. HR, we are having, I would say there are a lot of challenges on going forward, how we want to think. It doesn't impact the business immediately, but if you don't take action now to where we want to be, it's going to impact us somewhere down the line. So supply chains are severely stressed everywhere, globally. We've been seeing a lot of issues last year. I think this year might be a bit better, but how do we mitigate? So the questions, and I think having survived an economic crisis, that has been a huge learning on preparedness and being nimble. You need to be able to change quickly. larger companies have a lot less flexibility. And that's a challenge for most large companies. So these are the things that we talk about on seeing how do we keep being agile, for example, so that we can change when needed. I think, did that answer your question?
That does indeed. And if you were a public company, you'd be among the largest food companies and one of the largest listed companies in Sri Lanka, I suppose.
I think so.
Right. Shea Wickramasingha, this has been a wonderful conversation. Is there anything you'd want to add to round this off?
Look, I think to our consumers, I think being Sri Lankan, being from this small island, we all have a responsibility to see that we become stronger as a nation. We saw a massive political change. People do want change. And with that, I think we must be proud of who we are. Proud to stand up as Sri Lankans, proud to support Sri Lankan products, whatever they may be, because that's how economies become stronger. And I think we can do better there as well. And I hope the younger generation, really embrace this, and because we really need to build the nation up.
Thank you very much for joining us here in our studio.
Thank you.